Good evening, everyone. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing. Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you all. Before we do the roll call, I wanted to mention a couple things. First of all, it's a sad time here in the town of Fountain Hills. A pioneer in every sense of the word, Alan Cruikshank, has passed away. Our sincerest condolences and sympathies to his family, and our gratitude for everything he's done for our community, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come. Councilman Magazine and his wife have been knocked down with COVID for the last couple weeks, and he wanted to make sure that people didn't feel that you know, he knows his role and his duty, but that we understand that he remains committed to his position, and but they've had a tough go of it. And last, I want to mention that for the town of Fountain Hills, we do rotate our vice mayor position every 8 months, and I appreciate very much Jerry's service since last spring. He's gone above and beyond, and a funny feeling he'll still do that. And I look forward to working with Councilwoman McMahon, Peggy, and as she'll take us through next June. And I want to thank you both for your service very much. Now we'll do roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor McMahon. Here. Councilmember Fidel. Present. Councilmember Charno. Here. Councilmember Spelich. Present. Councilwoman Grzybowski.
Present.
Councilmember Magazine.
Thank you. Yeah, he wasn't going to be able to probably call in. Our first item are activities. Grady, do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Mayor. Real briefly, just wanted to do a sound out for the Community Services Department. They put on a Spooky Blast event last Saturday. Our family had a great time there. I brought my 2 grandchildren there and their families, and we had a great time. A lot of families were there. It was very family-oriented, a lot of kids having fun, and in a very safe environment that we made. This is the second year in a row. It used to be on the avenue. It was, I think it was called Stroll in the Glow, and I questioned it last year whether this was the thing to do, and I have to tell you the staff just did a knockout job on this, so so kudos to the staff on that. Also, I know a number of you are going to mention this, so I'll just be very brief, but a couple weekends ago, we had a Make a Difference Day, and what a neat event that was, and those are all my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Good evening. Yes, we did Make a Difference Day at the high school, which was fun. A little bit of dirty work, but it was good. And also the Spooky Blast was really, really great. I was helping out of a booth volunteering, and we had to like cut the line off. The kids kept coming up and wanting to participate in the games, and it was like after 8 o'clock. So they were having so much fun, it was hard to tell them no. But it is, I think that this year, I think there was like at least a third to a lot more people than there were last year. So it was really a successful event. Thank you to the town.
Thanks, Mayor. I had the privilege of attending the senior night game at Falcon Field Friday night. While the outcome wasn't what we wanted, it was great, though, to send the seniors off. They did a good job this year and really worked hard. And as Grady mentioned, we had Make a Difference Day, and I served with Grady, and we went to this gentleman's house for the second year in a row. So I want to give a little shout out to Rick Toth. Out of his own pocket, came out and put down weed preventer and pre-emergent on this man's property so that we'll have a much easier time next year. So he did a great job by doing that, and we really appreciate him stepping up and doing that. And then the last thing is the mayor and I attended the Salt River Shares Gaming Grant Luncheon, and we were presented with a nice little token of their appreciation. These are hand-engraved shells, shell necklace that they gave us, and it was really quite an event, and we were proud to represent the town there. So Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And let's see, Spooky Blast, I was there too, part of Noon Kiwanis, serving hot dogs and hamburgers. And we sold a lot of hot dogs, and so that was a good thing. And made some money that evening, and it was a fun event. And yeah, it seemed like a lot more people were there, so kudos to Community Services for that. And also Make a Difference Day again with Kiwanis, and we did some landscaping as well at a woman's house, and she was at a rehab facility at the time, so we didn't get to meet her, but obviously she had some needs there, so we're happy to help. And let's see, Red Ribbon Week, you know, we had the proclamation at the last council meeting, and the whole week went great over at the middle school, and culminating with health fair on Friday. We had all 400 kids from the school come through the gym, and we had about a dozen tables set up for different messages and education, and really went well. So I want to thank the Drug Coalition organized that. And then on Saturday, I was part of the National DA Take Back Day. So some of us from the coalition and the sanitary district helped out with the sheriff's office. Residents came by, dropped off unwanted or expired medications, and brought in 26 pounds of meds. So it was a good haul. So, and encourage anyone who still has things at home they don't need anymore. We do have a drug disposal box here in the lobby that's accessible whenever town hall is open, and you can just drop off those things anytime during the week. And of course, as the mayor mentioned, Alan did pass away, and of course I worked alongside him for 32 years, so obviously sad news, but he lived a good life, and there's going to be more in the paper next week, kind of a tribute to him, so wrote up something kind of about him, so should be a memorable edition next week, so thanks.
I was going to talk about Make a Difference Day as well. My husband and I have dumpster duty every year, and it's every bit as much fun as you think it sounds like it is. Although it is easier now, thank you, Justin, for bringing the backhoe, or whatever the thing is called that I call a squisher. That always helps the task a lot. Then this morning, I attended the Phoenix East Valley Critical Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, where I got to hear Audra speak, who's getting ready to speak for us here shortly, and I'm sure it's a very similar presentation. And that was my 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I wanted to make this announcement. I was asked, since we are a Purple Heart town, Marine veteran and Fountain Hills resident Phil Yin had informed us that in coordination with National Flag Foundation on November 11th, the 240th anniversary of the establishment of the Purple Heart will be observed across the United States. The National Flag Foundation and the Military Order of the Purple Heart, along with the Marine Corps League, have partnered for National Light to Unite. The plan is to have as many cities as possible across America light either purple or red, white, and blue in the evening on Veterans Day. The goal is to bring much-needed attention to the Military Order of the Purple Heart and the many deserving Purple Heart Medal recipients who find themselves in need on multiple levels. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania will light up first in the country, followed by the World Trade Center building, and then the rest of us as twilight comes. So please look for our fountain to glow purple on November 11th, and don't forget that we're on EarthCam Live, so share the news so that we can be seen worldwide honoring our veterans. Our Fountain Hills Cares event was timely also about veterans, and we had a lot of resources there, websites and such, so if it's not on our website yet, it will be. A lot of information that I think surprised some folks. Make a Difference Day, they made a video, and we'll be showing that at our next meeting. But yes, it was a wonderful day. We worked at the high school, and thanks, of course, to everybody that put this together in our Community Services Department and all of the volunteers. at the Maricopa Association of Governments Regional Council, we had a Prop 400 Economic Development presentation, which I'm sure also Audra, who's a Fountain Hills resident, will talk a lot about that. I went to Morning Star for Hazel, to declare Hazel Peterson Day, October 28th. Hazel was born in 1915, and it was her 107th birthday. And I understand that she was driving up until 103, and meeting her, it was just a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. The Spooky Blast was great. As Grady mentioned, they had done it along the fountain, but, in the way past, we always did do it at Four Peaks. So it was kind of a trip to be there with my granddaughters, when I can remember very vividly being there with their dad. So it was very awesome. Oh, and they had a movie too, Hotel Transylvania. So that was good, because it was like real mellow from all the activity that that Vice Mayor was talking about, to kind of go out there and sit on the grass and just watch the movie a little bit. I didn't last that long, but. And then, again, that lunch was awesome. It was kind of amazing when you think about it. So Salt River throws this wonderful lunch and gives gifts to people that they're already giving grants to, so it almost felt like, it would be that we should give the lunch, but it was an honor to be there. We really appreciated that. Our next item is going to be a proclamation that asks Vice Mayor Peggy McMahon to present as Fountain Hills becomes a dementia-friendly community. And please take it, Vice Mayor.
Good evening. Dementia-Friendly Community Awareness Proclamation is whereas, according to the Alzheimer's Association, more than 150,000 people in Arizona over the age of 65 live with dementia, impacting more than 262,000 family members and caregivers, with 53% who report their own chronic healthcare conditions themselves. And this number is expected to increase by 33% by 2005. And whereas the Community Services Department is working together to gather community leaders and experts in this area to better understand dementia and its implications. This team will evaluate the current strengths and weaknesses in the town to help improve outreach to those living with dementia. They increase awareness that it is possible to have a good quality of life with dementia, and that there's more to the person than just dementia. Whereas the town of Fountain Hills is committed to helping remove the stigma surrounding dementia through information and to connect those in every socioeconomic group with the resources and information they need. And whereas to proactively address public education, improve resource connections, and partner with businesses to bring awareness, the town of Fountain Hills is proactively working to become a nationally recognized dementia-friendly town in 2023, designation to be bestowed on the town by the Dementia Friendly America Network. Therefore, Mayor Jenny Dickey of the town of Fountain Hills does hereby proclaim on November 1st, 2022, the town of Fountain Hills a dementia-friendly community. And we call upon the community to serve people with dementia and memory loss and their caregivers by providing awareness of local programs and services and emotional support. So, yay.
Is there someone here to present that to? Linda, would you like to come up and get the plaque? Thank you. She'll meet you down there, and then you can say a few words if you'd like.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Dementia Friendly Task Force, I'm really honored to accept this proclamation or be part of this endeavor. My husband and I live here in Fountain Hills, and 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with dementia. So it's really changed our lives, and we feel really blessed and honored and thrilled that our town has decided to draw awareness to this disease and support both people who have the disease and also their caregivers, because it's a 24/7 job for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next item is a recognition of outgoing board and commission member, the Honorable Enrique Melendez, for his service on the Sister Cities Advisory Commission. I've known this fine man for many years. He's devoted to Fountain Hills. Always his actions are to treat others with respect and fairness, and we've appreciated that over the years. I'm going to bring the certificate down. If you come up and meet me, I'll read it to you, and then you can say a few words, Enrique. Thank you. Thank you. Recognition of Enrique Melendez. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize the Honorable Enrique Melendez, who was appointed to serve as Commissioner of the Sister Cities Advisory Commission by the Town Council in the month of June 2016. During his service on the commission, Enrique took an active role in all activities and projects that the commission undertook. His many hours of volunteer service, devotion, dedication, and contributions are sincerely appreciated by this council, his fellow commissioners, and all the town's residents. Whether serving as our town as a council member or as a commissioner, Enrique is the embodiment of dedication, passion, and commitment to the interests of our community. Thank you, Enrique. I'm going to leave this here so you can have that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
It's on, yep.
I first of all like to express the deepest sympathy from the Ministry of El Salvador, Mayor Oscar Gomez of Ataco, and the Diplomatic Corps of Arizona for the loss of a giant in the community and a good friend, Mr. Alan Cruikshank. Mayor and Council, excuse my back, the Sister City program began with Alan Cruikshank and Jerry Miles in 1996. They both went to Casterly, Belgium, developed a contract with the mayor there, and that was the beginning of our Sister City program. Kudos to both of them who are upstairs. I wanted to mention, Mayor, the support I've received from former Mayor Jerry Miles, who went to El Salvador 5 times with his wife, Mayor Wally Nichols, who went 3 times with his wife, and Mayor Sharon Morgan, who was very passionate about sending those 44 high school students to build 26 homes, and it's called Fountain Hills Village. So I know there are other sister cities in the organizations throughout the valley, but I think this is the one that we have the best. So I want to thank you and the support of the council and the community. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next are our scheduled public appearances and presentation. We will have a presentation from Audra Koester-Thomas, who is the Transportation Planning Program Manager at MAG, and also a longtime Fountain Hills resident. Grady, did you have anything?
Just wanted to go ahead and introduce her. You did that very well. I am remiss because I did not introduce, tonight we have our acting town attorney, Trish Stuhan, and I totally meant to include this in my comments before, but welcome. We appreciate you being here. Our town attorney could not be here tonight, and we're very pleased to have Trish here in his stead. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Thomas, who, as some of us have already seen with Maricopa Association of Governments, has a presentation on the extension of Prop 400, which is, as you're going to see, very critical not only to our community, but also to the economic vitality of the entire region. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor Dickey, members of council. Special thank you to Vice Mayor McMahon for the invitation this evening to present on an occasion that I was hoping would be a completely different presentation in educating about a future ballot initiative that we expected to be on the ballot in 2 weeks, but instead faced with a unique challenge, and luckily we're in it together here in the Maricopa region, to continuing a dedicated half-cent sales tax first established by voters back in 1985. House Bill 2685 was surprisingly vetoed by the governor after seeing almost 2/3 of the House and Senate support this legislative session, taking us by surprise shortly after the 4th of July. The direction we have been given by our elected officials and regional council executive committee specifically soon after that veto was to take on a three-pronged approach. First, immediately begin to analyze what the mobility impacts would be of the veto. Second, to pull in legal counsel to evaluate all of our alternatives to seek an opportunity for voters' voices to be heard. And then third, to do an economic impact analysis associated with the continued extension or 25-year extension as the proposed House Bill 2685 had intended to refer to voters this November. I will present a slice of each of these as part of this presentation and certainly acknowledge the opportunity to answer any questions at the completion of today's presentation. So with that, I want to orient us with just a little bit of historical context. I think it's important to recognize what this place was and what it has become because of the dedicated half-cent sales tax, first established by voters back in 1985, known as Proposition 300. It became a reality after regional leaders heard that it would take 60 years, 60, for the Loop 101, the initial segments of Loop 101, to be constructed. So it still wouldn't have been at this time. And that was deemed unacceptable at a time of high growth and certainly a significant time in our history. And so our mayors got together and decided to tax themselves to be able to establish what we now know as the regional transportation system. This is what that world looked like back in 1986. You will see Interstate 17. Even Interstate 10 wasn't completed through the region. In fact, Deck Park Tunnel in central Phoenix was the last portion of Interstate 10 completed, and that was just back in the early 90s. I'm sure many of you remember that. But really, this transportation network in our region was a collection of arterial streets. To get from here to there required going north, south, east, west, and back and forth, and certainly wasn't an efficient route. And so mayors got together to establish, like I mentioned, Proposition 300, which delivered this, what we know today as the freeway loop system. Loops 101, 202, the 51, and 143 amongst its achievements in the first 20 years of the tax. At the time, it was one of the first dedicated half-cent sales tax in the country. Since then, we have been copied and far surpassed in the amount of investment made, recognizing how often constituents value transportation for a good quality of life. Our leaders came back together in 2004 and established a new program known as Proposition 400. It's the current program we are under now. It helped to finish out the establishment of the freeway network, including Loop 303 opening South Mountain Freeway just a few years ago. Also became multimodal, recognizing the urbanization of the region, our growing and diversifying transportation needs, helping to establish light rail. Opening of streetcar just a few months ago in Tempe. What you don't see illustrated on this map are hundreds of miles of contributions to that important arterial grid network. It's unique for this region, having that contiguous network. It also serves as the backbone of our bus transit system, which carries over 7 million miles of bus service supported by the half-cent sales tax every year. It also wholly funds the ADA paratransit that's federally required for our most vulnerable citizens, those seniors and disabled members of the community using transit. The sales tax wholly funds that across the region. In addition, you don't see illustrated in this map the iterative widenings of the freeways, adding of the HOV lanes, important traffic interchanges, of course, that come with iterative improvements, or our other programs, including active transportation, safety, ITS, and air quality. The outcomes of this investment, over 40 years worth of investment, we all know and recognize on a daily basis. It saves us time, estimated to save you over 100 hours each and every year, just the freeway network alone. Most of our jobs are located within a mile or two of a freeway corridor or a high-capacity transit corridor, and you see the compounding valuation of transportation investments that bring wealth and prosperity to us all. It's no wonder that our economic development partners put the transportation network front and center when they go out and look for the next brightest businesses to bring to Arizona. Our friends at GPEC have assembled this map demonstrating all of the different businesses and employers they've located to the region, and you will see they are proximate to the high-capacity transportation network for which this region has built. And it is why they put the transportation network front and center, because it is what has developed and landed such important economic investments. And then most of all, and probably most importantly of all, our constituents very much get it. It's probably the part that's most frustrating about the veto. We weren't surprised at the completion of the plan development process that included considerable public engagement, because this is a plan buy-in for the public after all, that it was polling at over 70% support. Folks in this region uniquely value transportation investments. They uniquely value the long-range planning that has gone into the system. They don't know who's responsible, they're not sure who's necessarily in charge, but they very much value the investment that has been made over the last 40 years and desperately want to see it continue. So we're in this very unique position after 40 years of demonstrated investment. Our future is quite uncertain, and we do not have a path to the ballot to continue important transportation investments into the future. This is the composition of our long-range investment plan that was unanimously adopted by our regional council. That's the 32-member agencies, including the town of Fountain Hills, that comprise the Maricopa Association of Governments. We don't take that unanimous support lightly. We worked very hard. Mayors worked very hard to make difficult trade-off decisions to come to that compromissive plan. And what you see here is a very sophisticated plan that includes not only the sales tax, but a variety of other funding sources available to the region, including federal formula funds that come to the MPO, which is why we're designated, as well as the smaller thread that you'll see at the very top, which is the State Highway User Revenue Fund, or our share of what was formerly known as the gas tax, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What you see here is a 25-year plan of over $36 billion of investments. Last time I was here, I talked a little bit more about the capital investment plan itself. I won't spend as much time on that today, other than just to acknowledge the several hundred different capital investment projects that we have included as part of the plan. You'll see them mapped here. It includes important completion of our freeway network, completion of the HOV network, establishing of the SR-30 in the Southwest Valley, completion of the SR-24 in the Southeast Valley, complete reconstruction of I-17, that original piece of infrastructure I mentioned at the top of the presentation, as well as important extensions of transit west out of Phoenix, as well as east out of Tempe, both through light rail and streetcar, and also bringing a new mode of transit to the region, bus rapid transit, for which we're very excited about its potential. Provides a lot of the high quality value of getting somebody from point A to point B, but at a significantly lower cost as light rail. What's also important to note about our plan is the dedicated programs we have set aside. You'll see that in the tangerine color in the lower left-hand corner. These are the programs, several of them already established at MAG as part of Proposition 400, but many that have grown because of the public engagement and feedback that we have received. These are the programs that our constituents say bring them the highest quality of life. They're the things that matter the most to them. Notably, active transportation. You'll see $1 billion set aside for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We heard loud and clear this was important to constituents. It's protecting our most vulnerable users of the system. We have a bad reputation as it relates to bicycle and pedestrian crashes in this region, notably. We want to go above and beyond to provide a safe way for those users to use our system. But you'll see continued investment in air quality. We are in a non-attainment area for air quality that requires us to meet certain targets to ensure the federal funding that we're also relying on can continue to come into the region. A variety of arterial programs, a new program, emerging technology, continuation of ITS, and other important investments. As part of the arterial program itself, there are several projects included in it for the town of Fountain Hills. I wanted to spend just a moment of time reflecting on those. You'll see our major arterials articulated here, where the region is poised to contribute over $17 million for Palisades Boulevard reconstruction, over $6 million for Saguaro reconstruction, as well as widening of Shea Boulevard of over $32 million. These are the region's share coming out of the extension of Proposition 400, for which partnering with the town to be able to enable continuation and a reconstruction of these facilities. However, if we're unable to continue the dedicated half-cent sales tax, we will lose over half the funding available to the region. It will completely decimate the regional transportation system that we know today. So I want to talk a little bit about what those implications are. When we were down at the legislature with House Bill 2685, we got asked a lot of questions, and one of them was, why are you increasing the amount of funding of the sales tax to transit? And that answer is very simple. It's because that's what the public wanted. We heard loud and clear a deep desire to expand transit throughout the region, improve its quality, and we responded. At the end of the day, voters are the ones who are the final say on the dedicated half-cent sales tax continuation. We want to hear what they want, and we delivered accordingly. But what's important is when you take all funding sources available to the region into consideration, by proportion of program, it's actually the arterial and programs that expand the most compared to Proposition 400. I want to talk a little bit about why that is. One of the major drivers of the need to expand our regional programs and our arterial program is because one very important revenue source continues to diminish in its value, and that's the Highway User Revenue Fund, as I mentioned earlier. Sometimes referred to as the gas tax in this state. It is and has been the historic funding and revenue source to build, maintain, and operate the roadways throughout the state of Arizona. What you see here in this illustration is the last 21 years of revenues that have come in from the Highway User Revenue Fund adjusted for inflation. And what you see is in the year 2000, the state received more in Highway User Revenue funds than it did last year. During that same time, the state's population grew by more than 40%. We have not modernized or increased the Highway User Revenue Fund since 1991, and what you see here is an inverse relationship. We are using our roads more and more every single day and literally contributing less and less to their operations, maintenance, or even expansion. It's why there was so much pressure at the beginning of our process from towns like the town of Fountain Hill, as well as 31 other member agencies who submitted so many arterial projects and needs because the value of HERF is so constrained. So what are the implications if we're unable to continue this dedicated half-cent sales tax? At least for the arterial program, expect fewer new and improved roadways region-wide. It'll limit agencies' abilities to respond to economic development opportunities, and the decaying condition of our roadways is only going to increase over time due to lack of funding to be able to maintain them. Moving on now to transit, the picture gets even more bleak. What you see in this map is the current transit system here throughout our region, including our express route that comes morning and evening here to Fountain Hills. What you see illustrated in the red are routes that are either wholly funded by the dedicated half-cent sales tax or partially funded by the sales tax. In other words, without a continuation of the tax, these are the routes that are at risk of discontinuing January 1st, 2026. There's a lot of red on this map. What's important to recognize is that we're probably underrepresenting just how much transit has risk. As I mentioned before, the sales tax also funds the federally required ADA paratransit costs. Those will then rest at local cities' levels to pick up without a dedicated half-cent sales tax. What that means is cities will either have to find even more revenue to come up with that shortfall or be forced to reduce the transit service they already have in operation, further contracting the system that we were told loud and clear by the public they wanted to improve and expand throughout the region. And then we come to the freeway program. This is just a selection of a few of the projects that we have in the investment plan for our freeway network. I want to point out specifically what's illustrated in this map is our booming economic development corridors throughout the region. It's no mistake that the projects that we have included in this plan not only support quality of life, but they're tied to economic development and the continuation of bringing high-quality jobs into this region. You will see some of the most notable economic development corridors highlighted here, including TSMC, the largest foreign direct investment in state history, which is projected to bring over 11,000 jobs here to the region. All of these projects are at risk without the continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax. In short, the future of freeways looks bleak in this region. What funding is left is that of federal nature and will be largely spent on meeting federal performance targets. The region will not be able to build any new freeways. There'll be limited expansions or modernizations of the existing facilities. And a question that we got asked a lot, well, can't the state pick up and run? How about that bipartisan infrastructure bill that's bringing in a historic influx of funding into transportation? And while we appreciate and value all of those investments, they are not enough to make up the gap. We have a demonstrated transportation need in this region of $90 billion. And the investment plan we've put together only gets us to $36.7 billion of that need. The reality is we have a dramatic difference in needs, and not surprising. We're the fastest growing region in the country, fastest growing county in the country, and we have several of the cities that are fastest growing in their different age or different size categories. It's not surprising that we have tremendous transportation needs, but I think the amount of need is so dramatically different. So I talked a little bit about the implications of not continuing the tax. I want to pivot now to our economic impact analysis that we just completed. We partnered with a nationally renowned economic and finance group, EBPUS. They are known for doing this kind of work nationwide. They have a renowned model called the Tretis model that does this kind of work. We've used it before in the region, and we're able to use our sophisticated transportation demand model in concert with their economic model to help understand really what the implications are of implementing the investment plan. And what you see here are its inputs, those projects that I've already identified on our freeway highway system, the arterial projects, including those here in the town of Fountain Hills, as well as the transit projects. And we see a considerable amount of benefit, of course, to all of them, but it was important to quantify them, and so I wanted to provide just a few of those results to you today. What you see on the left side is just some of the immediate impacts. We see a decrease in congestion across all modes and purposes with this investment package. And that's important to recognize, especially since we are still so fast growing in this region. We're going to add a couple more million people during the same horizon. We're still seeing a decrease in congestion from today with the improvements that we included in this plan. Speeds across all modes increase by 1 or 2 miles per hour, and that may not seem like a lot, but when you take that in aggregate for every trip you make, every single day, and every one your neighbor makes, as well as the person that you know back in Buckeye, that at an aggregate level is significant and adds to a considerable amount of time travel savings. And we also see an influx in transit trips. We weren't surprised by that. We're adding quality transit as part of this plan. So what does that translate to in terms of economic societal benefit? We see the time travel savings alone calculating at approximately $73 billion over the 25-year investment plan. Of that, $40 billion is coming from business time and reliability savings, and then just freight interests alone are seeing a benefit of $4.4 billion. And why is that important? Because those savings get reinvested into the economy. Keeping those dollars circulating longer into your economy, especially the region's economy, is what builds wealth. It's what brings prosperity. It's why we all endeavor to do good economic development. And that's why it's so important to capture just how much those savings are. Because when they are reinvested into the region, you see these kinds of outcomes. We're expecting net new businesses to increase their sales by over $113 billion over 25 years. Just the region's net economic activity to grow by $60 billion, our salaries to increase by $40 billion, and the plan itself is expected to bring and sustain over 31,000 jobs each and every year. And these aren't just any jobs. These are medium to high wage jobs. These are the jobs elected officials in this region over the last 20 and 30 years have endeavored to bring to this region to make it more sustainable. These are high quality jobs that have taken a generation to develop and land here in the region, for which we are now risking. So what are some of the key takeaways? Clearly, the loss of the dedicated half-cent sales tax will be detrimental to the transportation network here in this region. It is our notable competitive advantage. We will lose out to our competitive regions across the country for new economic development. The region's economic network has led to the economic prosperity that we see today, and it's our competitive edge, as I mentioned. Without continuing the dedicated half-cent sales tax, the cost of doing business is going to increase, local sales will be reduced, and we're going to lose high-quality jobs. And I think this is the most important point that I want to leave you with. Timing is critical. Enabling legislation, that opportunity to do a direct referral to voters, is needed as quickly as possible because it's costing us money. We are the only county in the state that has to go to the legislature for a direct referendum back to our voters for a local initiative. All other 14 counties have the ability to go directly to their Board of Supervisors to place a question on ballots up to 1 cent. Pinell County has an election just in 2 weeks. If they're successful, they will be up to 1 cent of an excise tax for transportation. While we still do not have a path to the ballot. The costs are significant. SR 30 in the Southwest Valley, the center segment between loops 303 and 202, it's about a $2.5 billion project. It's unique, it's complex, there are some constraints associated with delivering that project, but with the veto and the lack of an ability to path to the ballot, we're expecting a minimum of a 2-year delay to that project. The inflationary costs alone that taxpayers will have to eat if we are able to find a successful path even in the near term is estimated to be about $300 million for that project alone. So there are real consequences ultimately to the action this summer. But I want to end on a positive note. You'll see pictured here our Transportation Policy Committee. This is the public-private partnership at MAG that is responsible by state statute for developing and being stewards of the plan itself. It is a partnership of our local elected officials, as well as 6 members of the business community that are appointed by the legislature to endeavor on this partnership. You'll see pictured here the day that the plan was unanimously recommended for adoption. Regional Council the next day took action and unanimously adopted the plan, and I can tell you and report out that Mayor Dickey, alongside her fellow mayors and elected officials, have reaffirmed their support for the plan, encouraged us as quickly as possible to find a pathway to the ballot. We've been endeavoring on that front, including, as I mentioned earlier, engaging legal advice to find alternatives or the best path forward, and we continue to appreciate your support in doing so. So that completes my presentation. Mayor Dickey, members of council, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, Jerry.
Audra, I have no doubt that the $113 billion more in sales that we'll lose if this doesn't get done will affect our sales tax revenue. So my question for you is, one, you're looking for a path, hopefully you find that, 25-year extension. Why don't we make it 50 years so we don't have to go through this again?
Mayor Dickey, members of council, that's a great question. I will step back to 2001 and say, tandem to the motion to adopt the plan, there was another piece that came corollary to that, and that was to find parity and endeavor to find parity with the 14 other counties in the state of Arizona. So we have standing authority just like they do and don't have to go back through the path of the legislature. I will tell you that the previous two, Propositions 300 and 400, were both 20-year plans. This is a 25-year plan in part to fit all of the highest of high priority projects in. I want to qualify that. One of the things we were told by the legislature at the beginning of this effort was do not go over a half-cent sales tax. That was instructions given to our elected officials. Even though we saw considerable public support for more, and I mentioned already, we demonstrated $90 billion worth of transportation need throughout the region. But our mayors came together, made a lot of compromises and trade-offs to get to and retain that half-cent sales tax, not to go over that threshold. But in order to keep the most highest priority projects in, the decision was to make it 25 years, that extra 5 years to affirm projects out to the year 2050. That was the direction the legislature gave us. We delivered that accordingly. But I will tell you that there is even more sense of urgency on finding a resolution to ensuring that Maricopa County has standing authority for the future. So when the public and our elected officials endeavor to do so, we have an easier path to the ballot.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I need some clarification, please, on the regionally supported projects in Fountain Hills, the Palisades Boulevard. Are those funds available now? Are those funds we're going to lose if 400 doesn't go through? A little bit of clarification, please.
Mayor Dickey, members of council, Vice Mayor McMahon, those are projects included in the investment plan supported by a continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax. And so without the dedicated half-cent sales tax, those projects, the 200 others, and the $36.7 billion of the entire program is at risk.
Well, I can feel my blood pressure going up as you went on. So you mentioned 32 member agencies. I'm probably not going to end up with a question. I'm just 32 member agencies, bunch of mayors, bunch of other organizations, every party, every agreement. Everybody has, you know, their own local wants, and yet after months and months and months, we came together with a plan that was accepted by all of us unanimously, all the subcommittees, and brought it forward. Then Miracle, and the 25-year thing was actually a sticking point because they were like, dare we go above the 20? So we went to the 25, didn't go with the more than the half cent, which obviously we haven't even been able to pay for the projects that were already in Prop 400 in the first place. So it was like, even if this passed, a lot of it was going to have to be used for what was already passed. So we get through that, then we go to the legislature. You know, big deal, a lot of meetings and just really successful. It passes the legislature, right? This veto was a shock and stunner, and still have no idea why it happened. So that, of course, goes along with the idea of why does Maricopa County need, we did get it through the legislature, so I'm not even that worried about that part of it. But that does lead to needing the signature. So that's what happened there. Maricopa County is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for this region, which is, again, planning is something that sometimes gets muddled as to the value of it. These former maps that you just showed us, as they brought us into now, just shows you the value and the necessity of proper planning. I think when you look at the HERF funding, it reminds me a little bit about what's going on with the school districts. All these school districts across the state of Arizona are asking for overrides and bonds and such because the state funding, as with transportation, is inadequate to keep up with our needs. They both point to that same sort of issue where we're not getting it from the state of Arizona. Yet, education, transportation are job creators, they're business magnets. You ask anyone, anybody that you're talking to, anybody Amanda talks to, what are you looking for? Excellent education, access, access, access. So how are you going to bring these headquarters? How are you going to bring these professional CEOs and their families and the branches and the entrepreneurs here? You want something one way, but you're not providing what they need to make that happen. Fountain Hills had 13 projects. You know, some of them were, you know, real wish list kind of stuff, but, you know, we had a couple of transit things in there because our bus route isn't, you know, utilized as much as it could be. We had some transit. We had an important intersection improvement for 87 and the Shea Boulevard. Well, yeah, we would have been happier if more than 3 or 4 of them got accepted, but it's 0 now. It's moot on what happened, on what was accepted, because right now there's nothing. And when we had this presentation at MAG last week, I mentioned at the time, because we all do feel protective of our own areas. So what if the bond committee comes back and tells, the road committee comes back and says Fountain Hills needs a road bond? School districts always need bonds and extra money. Well, then you start to say, okay, you're playing games with our planning, because we have different times that we're allowed to ask for these things. And now, what's the possibility of next November having 3 different things on the ballot, which is hard for voters to accept? So then you have your own full-throated support of this, kind of like, we really need, you know, XYZ in Fountain Hills or Goodyear or wherever. So the whole thing, very frustrating. Feels like, really like they play games, or, you know, the veto played games with a ton of mayors and staff and time. And it's very, very frustrating, and we will do what we can to move this forward in a way for our entire region and for the state. It's really, I mean, this is Maricopa County. It affects the whole entire state. And so, I could just feel the heat when you were going through this, because it's really been years of planning for this, and it was very, very unfortunate. I didn't know if anybody else would have any questions or comments at this time. Yes, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering, and I know there's going to be a lot of turnover in the legislature, and obviously there's going to be a different governor, you know, and I'm just wondering, you can look at that 2 different ways. You know, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you have any, I'm sure you've met with some of those newer folks already. You get any inclination from them, or?
Mayor Dickey, members of council, well, I'm not going to bet on politics anymore. I think this summer taught me a lesson, but I will say we've been monitoring all of that very closely. It is projected to be the largest incoming freshman class in memory to the legislature, so that's a huge education curve, certainly. We lost important votes, including our bill sponsor, including the Speaker of the House, who's largely responsible for getting this over the finish line at the end. I do want to acknowledge the success we did have in the legislature, almost 2/3 of both the House and Senate. That's remarkable given the current political climate. So I want to acknowledge the success we did have in getting through the legislature, but we lost a lot of those individuals who were yes votes, certainly. So we have a variety of alternatives that we're evaluating. We do have to go through the state legislature in order to have the direct referral, as I mentioned. So we have been working with our legal counsel on a variety of alternatives. Some of them are short-term, some of them are a longer-term lead to enable perhaps success at the end of the day. So we're working closely with our executive committee of mayors who are providing that direction. We'll continue to seek their direction on when and how to deploy accordingly, but know that there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes to feverishly find a path to the ballot for Maricopa County voters, and so they're not disenfranchised on this matter.
Thank you, and probably no one's worked harder than you, and we really appreciate it. She's been right in the center of this for a long, long time, so I want to really thank you, and it always makes me feel good to see you up there, because I know you're from here, and so I know that you care deeply, and we appreciate that. Thank you. Our next item is Mr. Pock is going to come up and give us an update on our quarterly revenue, and I don't know, I glanced at it, well, actually, I did more than that, and maybe there's a little bit better news after what we just had.
Exactly. While I'm pulling this up, I will say that I did get a text message from an employee, and if you're driving a maroon SUV in the parking lot, your lights are still on, so. And I didn't get this pulled up, even while I did that, so. All right. So before we get into the first quarter update, I did put together a slide for fiscal year 22. Overall, we had a really good year. Our general fund revenues exceeded expectations by almost $2 million. Our general fund expenditures were $5.7 million less than what we had budgeted. That includes the $4.2 million that we received from ARPA and the savings that resulted from that. Our audited year-end fund balances will be available when the financials are presented in 2 weeks. Our audit results are in, and those will be presented to council then. After all of our reserve requirements are met, and then the suggested fiscal year 23, the current year transfers are made, a total of $3.7 million will be transferred to the Capital Projects Fund. And then $4.2 million of this year's, current year's revenues, which will, again, result from the ARPA savings, will be transferred to the Streets Fund for that, for work there. So now we'll get into the current year, first quarter. Again, we're off to a really good start. Our overall TPT revenue collection was up for the first quarter, exceeded our expectations. The net taxable activity across everything that happens within the town that is subject to TPT, that has increased about 10% over fiscal year 22 for the same period. And then we've also had modest year-over-year increases in each of the categories for TPT. State shared income tax revenue is significantly higher than it was last year. You'll see this towards the end of the presentation. Unfortunately, we're not going to meet the league's estimate, though. But they're not coming in quite as high as what the league expected. But we'll deal with that as it goes along. The other notable part to this is that the HERF money that Audra was just talking about in her presentation, those receipts aren't quite as high as they have been in previous years. As you know, higher gas prices reduces demand, and since HERF is per gallon and not per dollar, that's taken a hit. Not a huge hit, but it's noticeable. So as far as that net taxable activity, you can see that compared to the prior 4 years. The total activity was just under $139 million for the quarter. As far as the total TPT collection across all categories and for all funds, we had budgeted just under $3.7 million for the quarter. We collected almost 4.5, so that was a good increase. $830,000 more than what we expected. However, $450,000 of that was from an audit collection. That's obviously a one-time audit, so we won't have that. That's why it's so much higher in that first month of July. $380,000, though, was due to increased activity. And then again, it was $850,000 more than last year. Retail sales is obviously our largest category. We had budgeted $2.08 million. We collected $2.21 million, $130,000 more than expected, and an increase of $280,000. And I'm not sure, either I'm going colorblind or my presentation got a little mixed up, but we've got 2 yellow lines there. The good news is that fiscal year 22 is the one on top of the other one, so we are growing in the right direction. The next one is construction category. This includes prime contracting and speculative builders. We budgeted $480,000, we collected $939,000. It's no surprise that this is where the audit collection was the category where that audit collection was made. But we still had $9,000 more than expected and $47,000 more than last year. It's a very consistent chart. Our transportation, utilities, and communications category. We had budgeted $313,000, collected $484,000. It's $171,000 more than what we thought we'd receive, and an increase of $7,000 over last year. Real estate, again, you can see that these charts, over the past 4 years are staying pretty consistent among these categories, which is great to see, and they are growing from year to year, which is even better to see. We've budgeted $239,000 for this category, collected $258,000. Again, $19,000 more than expected, with an increase of almost $40,000 over last year. Restaurants and bars, budgeted $246,000, collected $268,000, $22,000 more than expected, and an increase of $5,000 from last year. This is really good to see, especially since that's usually the first category to get hit when things start getting bad, so it's good. The next one, also very volatile and susceptible to economic conditions, is services category. We had budgeted $290,000, collected $317,000. It's $27,000 more than expected over those 3 months, and an increase of $21,000 over last year. So then we get to the state shared revenues. The sales tax, state shared sales tax did very well. We budgeted $852,000, collected $836,000. That's slightly below what we expected, but it's still pretty close. So it's better than we did last year, as you can see from the graph. And I think we'll probably make up that difference during the busier months of the year. The income tax I've already talked about a little bit. You can see how much higher it is for this fiscal year. However, it's not quite exactly as high as what the league estimate was. And that should stay pretty even. Hopefully that one doesn't move. So then the HERF revenues that we talked about also. We had budgeted $472,000, and we collected $417,000 over 3 months. You can see there in the graph that it's well below last year, and I do believe that's just due to the higher gas prices and lower demand. So
Let me just point out that the reason that happens is because the sales tax, the gas tax is based on gallons.
Correct.
So you would think all this, crazy pricing would bring in more sales tax, but it does not, and it's been that way for many, many years.
Absolutely. And then the vehicle license tax is fairly consistent across, from last year. We budgeted $282,000, we collected $287,000. So with that, that's our revenue update for the first quarter. I'm very pleased as far as where we are in the economic conditions and that sort of thing right now. That we're
Thank
looking
you.
Pretty good.
Questions?
Questions?
Comments? I just wanted to mention that we need to be aware, and I don't know how it's going to relate to what you just gave us, but there are candidates and sitting legislators, including last year, who propose eliminating sales tax on rentals and eliminating sales tax on groceries. So I know that, the reasoning for that is to help individuals, but it'll have a minimal savings on individuals, and it could really hurt cities, especially like us, that, really, really depend on that kind of thing. So, for example, you had $250,000 rental sales tax in the first quarter. I'm not sure how that might relate to that, but, if it went away totally, that would be a lot, because times 4 per year. And then the retail, we had $2.21 million, and I don't know how much of that is groceries, but 2.21 million per quarter. So however much of that is groceries, and I know there's reasons that you can't like hone in on what everything is, but if that was eliminated, I mean, we'd have a lot of decisions to make up for that. Again, it's a kind of a drastic effect on municipalities and probably a minimal actual real help for folks with their rent and such, so. Yes, sir.
And those candidates are just one vote. They still have to get it through.
Yeah, and last year, though, you know how they actually proposed getting rid of the rental sales tax, and I know that, you know, they were thinking in terms of people needing to pay their rent, but it would end up being like, you know, saving them 30, 40, whatever bucks a year, or, you know, maybe a little more, but not enough to be able to actually, you know, save that. So they did turn that into a study committee, which I hope, but I'm like almost positive it'll come back. But you're right, and that's what we need to hone in on that, right? Any other questions or comments? Thank you, David. Next is our call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. You should have in front of you a letter from a George Kasnoff. He was going to appear in person. George, are you here? Okay. You have what he wrote, so you can read that. And then we have also at your dais, there is an email from Barry Wolborski, but he's also in the audience and would like to speak.
If I do this often enough, you'll all get my name right, I guess. So I'm back to speak about the parking signs in front of the Civic Center. And I wrote you that and showed you pictures of the signs before and after, which are not much change. I thank Mr. Miller. He did send me a response as an email, and he spoke to me a little earlier today. I understand the reasons why there needs to be some control over that parking area, because we really don't want undesirable things happening in that lot. And I'm all in favor of not having undesirable things happen. I think still the signs are very confusing, as they say, parking only for Civic Center use. I understand that that's, how can I say it? It's partially enforced, or it's enforced on certain things but not enforced on other things, which doesn't strike me as being a good law or a good regulation. I think some other things should be investigated, like maybe putting a number of hours of parking that are allowed in that area, so 4 hours or 3 hours, which would eliminate probably everything that Mr. Miller said was a problem there, but would still allow people to park there for events down at the fountain or events on the avenue. And a lot of those are coming up really soon. Farmers Market starts this week. And then we have a whole bunch of events between now and the end of the year. So I think it would be good to get those things clarified, so that it's just not me and Mr. Miller and you guys and the people here who understand what it means, but that anybody who reads the sign can understand what it means. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Next, we have Crystal Kavanaugh.
Good evening. I wasn't actually going to speak about anything tonight, but once again, something has occurred. And I can't help but feel that the Code Enforcement Department is being utilized as a weapon by removing select political signs when certain community members disagree with the message. The most recent example is today, when a perfectly placed 4x4 orange and blue sign against the bond and override that was located at the entrance to the community center parking lot went missing. This sign was put up on Friday at sunrise and remained there until today, as is legal this last week in the election, along with other like-minded signage. Coincidentally, when signs from the other side of the issue and other side of the aisle were put up today, suddenly code enforcement was alerted. And when our sign was discovered missing, a police report was actually filed by a member on our committee, as we needed to do many times before during the town council race. But after I spoke with code enforcement, they told me that they did indeed remove the sign. Of course, no one called us to inform us of this as is required. It just happened to be discovered by us on our own. I asked him why remove it. This was an approved and legal location according to the sign ordinance. He said because it slightly encroached over the sidewalk and there had been a gentleman using a motorized vehicle that had interfered with. Really? I have a photo that shows exactly where that sign was, and it does not interfere with anything. In addition, during the recent town council election, a different 4x4 sign had been placed in this very location without any issues because the placement is legal. In fact, we use the very same holes in the ground. When the new council is seated, I strongly urge them to remove this convoluted sign ordinance that seems to be open to interpretation, with rules and excuses being made up as needed to single out opposing political views. This is a misuse of our town government, and it must stop. Thank you.
Mayor, that's it for public comment.
Thank you very much. Next, we have our consent agenda. Any motion, please?
Move to approve.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Our regular agenda item, our first one is about System 4 of Phoenix contract. Rachel, Grady?
Yes, just quickly, this is a routine item, but I've asked Rachel Goodwin to go ahead and give a little bit of a brief report on this item because there were a question or two from council members. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Goodwin.
Thank you. Again, this is more of an internal cleanup, if you will. We earlier this fall, council approved a contract, a cleaning services contract that we use for this building and for the community center. We also use them for our parks, and when that contract was drafted, it did not include the parks, so we had two concurrent contracts running. The parks side is running out. It ends this calendar year, so it'll end at the end of December. So in an effort to try to consolidate and have one master contract so that it was easier for procurement as well as payment and tracking, we went ahead and updated the contract to piggyback on the existing one that was approved earlier this fall. So tonight's request is to approve the Systems 4 of Phoenix contract amendment and the associated budget transfers to consolidate everything into one. Any questions I can answer?
Thank you. Any questions? Do you have speaker cards on this item?
Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. All right, can I get a motion?
Move to approve System 4 of Phoenix Contract 2023-039.2 and associated budget transfers.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks so much.
Do you have this next one too, or?
I do. I'm
All
just
right.
looking for our PowerPoint here.
Thank you.
I believe this is it here. There we go. I'm just going to go. Let me just launch. The next item is a public art item. So per our town policy, we have a new commercial building being constructed on Desert Vista, which is sort of, there's a map here. It's kind of hard to explain. It's backed by the dog park. If you're familiar with the dog park, I believe it was a former location of a church or a storage unit. There's several things back there, but it is now being constructed for vehicle and storage, high-end vehicle and storage. It's known as Motor Vault. So this is the location here. And per our policy, again, any commercial construction is required to contribute to our public art fund and/or contribute a piece of art equivalent to. So the proposed public art piece is a replica of the American icon, the Ford GT, which is shown here. But it will not be life-size. It will be a smaller version. Good try. But bigger than a matchbox. How about that? Somewhere in between. So this is the rendering of it. It is a stainless steel sculpture. Gives you an idea. It would be placed up on a pedestal, measuring roughly 72 inches by 48 inches in height. The piece is being commissioned by artist Jamie, I'm going to butcher the last name here, I believe it's Skina. He has been an industrial designer. You can see some of his work here. He does one-of-a-kind custom sculptures, and also works with General Motors for their design process. So he has been commissioned for this piece. Regarding the policy and the financial requirements, again, any commercial development is subject to this. Motor Vault is required to either put in a piece of art or contribute 0.75%. The estimated cost of construction is $3.7 million. Therefore, they qualify at 0.75%, which is roughly $28,000. And the piece between the commissioning, the design, installation, and then the supporting landscaping and lighting is a rough contribution of about $30,000. So they meet all of the requirements. I believe we have someone here tonight with the program, so he can certainly answer any questions, as can I. So we are looking for council approval to move forward with this project.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Rachel? Yes?
Rachel, the purpose of the art for the town, right? Is it for the town to benefit by it, correct?
Correct.
And who's going to own this particular piece of art?
When a group decides to install a piece on their property, that is private property, therefore they are required for maintenance and care and upkeep of that piece. So they would be the responsible party for the art piece, as is any privately located art piece.
Okay. To me, this seems very self-serving. They can either pay cash to the town as far as their art fee or have a piece of art that benefits the town in some way. I mean, they have a beautiful building designed here. I don't see what the purpose of a car would be in front of it. I don't know how that's going to benefit the town as far as contribution. So it seems to me like I said, it's more self-serving than really giving something to the town.
Personally, I don't have a problem with the car. I understand what it is the business is doing, and the car is pretty darn cool. Life size would be better, but all right, whatever. I'll take 72 by 48 if that's all we can get. My disappointment is that it's not in public viewing area. If I remember, the drawing is you really have to go onto their property to see it, because it is only 72 by 48, so it's not visible from the street. I kind of feel like, I know the art folks have already approved it, the art committee has already approved it, but I feel like when we ask for art, it's great, he tied it into his business. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is if somebody wants to see it, they actually have to go onto the property to see it. Otherwise, I think it's spectacular.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to say for the first time in 4 years, I'm voting on an art piece that I don't have to stand and look at for a half hour to wonder what the hell it is. So I love it. I'm a car fanatic. If you want to put it out a little bit farther so the public can see it, have at it. We voted on stuff that I doubt a lot of council members even knew what it was that we were voting on. We recently voted on something that I won't get too blue, that, not you blue, but blue, that I didn't know what it was, and everybody that asked me to please not vote for it thought it was something really what it wasn't. Read between the lines. So I am 100% for this. If the owner would like to speak to the council member and the vice mayor's concern about it being hidden, but as far as the actual look of it, I think it's awesome.
Thank you, council members. Vern Haugen, one of the principals of the Motor Vault. It's actually right off the street. We're putting it out in the landscaping right in front of the parking. It's not inside our grounds or anything. We'll put it anywhere out there, and it'll be on a stainless steel pedestal. It'll be concreted in the ground. Art is in the eye of the beholder. I look at some of the art and I'm like, the car culture in Fountain Hills is huge. The car show you guys have here is the largest car show in the world right now. That the Avenue of the Fountains, Concourse of the Hills. I don't know if you've been to it, but I mean, it's unbelievable. and some of the car guys told me it is the top one in the entire world. And I can vouch for it because as we open these garages that these guys will put their car collections and stuff in, you can't believe how many people have come out of the woodworks with car collections like you can't believe. So I think this will be a really neat asset for the town. You know, there's small lots now, nowhere to put anything. We're trying to have a, you know, kind of a nice club atmosphere to it and things. And so, you know, where we're going to put it, we'll put it out in front. We can put it out. I mean, there's the parking. We can just put it out in front. I mean, it is visible from the street. We're trying to put it up on something height-wise. We'll get it up where it's high enough where we can light it, where you can drive by and see it. Especially we're spending $30,000 on something, we want it to be on display.
And you don't have a problem with people coming and taking a picture of it either then?
No.
Okay.
No, you know, this kid, I mean, I've started to look everywhere for this art, and this guy that's making this is unbelievable. Like, he makes scaled cars of, let me show you. Like, he'll copy cars inside and out, the motor, everything welds it out of little pieces of stainless steel. This thing is going to be really cool. And this is his first public art installation of a big piece, so he's really excited about it. And so I think this will be really nice. So, you know, we'll get it out on display the best we can. You know, we want it for people to see it. So, any other questions?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike, you have something? I guess when I think about whether they decide to put the art in their project or as part of their project, it's to make their building, you know, look nice. I think this is exactly the right use for something like this, and I think it's great. Any other questions or comments? Do we have any speaker cards? Sorry.
Mayor, no, we don't.
All right, thank you. Could I get a motion, please?
Move to accept the public art application for the sculpture and authorize it to be installed at the designated location at Motor Vault, Fountain Hills, LLC.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item is we're going to talk about our previous item that we've talked about, our in-house fire department. Grady, I'll start with you, and I'll go from there.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, just for the sake of the public, I just wanted to remind the Council and let the public know that we had a fire services study evaluation that occurred, and the presentation was given to the Council at its work session on August 23rd. And during that presentation, the firm McGrath Consulting gave a very glowing report on Rural Metro and talked about how Rural Metro had been doing a great job of meeting all of its contractual obligations. Part of what the firm's responsibility was and mission was to go and actually look at other models of potential emergency medical and fire service delivery options. And in addition to that, there were other options that looked at possibility of contracting, for instance, with the city of Scottsdale, looking at potential for intergovernmental agreements with like a fire district, and also then finally looking at in-house. And in-house had two options. One was bringing in-house with our own fire personnel, and another option was bringing it in-house with the consideration of moving towards automatic aid. Last month, then we didn't really have a lot of time because, as you recall, we also had the police review that was the same night, so it got to be a late night. So at the meeting last month, on October 4th, the council had an opportunity to kind of hone in on two of the primary recommendations, which it appeared that it was the two that were most viable were either continuing with Rural Metro or bringing in the fire department completely in-house. As you know, we have a hybrid model right now. So all of our equipment and fire stations are owned by the town. The difference would be is that Rural Metro is currently providing the personnel to staff up our fire department. So with that, the council then later took action. They had two options for consideration. One was either to continue longer term with the contract, the current model, hybrid model with Rural Metro, or to give direction to staff that they had a desire to bring this in-house. So tonight before you is an action item based on the unanimous decision that we had last month for us to give proper formal notice to Rural Metro to bring in the fire department in-house completely. And so as part of your consideration, obviously there's going to be discussion tonight, but as part of your motion that you would consider is not only to provide proper notice of ending the agreement with Rural Metro in 12 to 18 months, but also to direct staff to develop a transition plan. Transition plan is very important because we want to make sure that we do all the right steps in the right order in priority to make sure that when it comes time after the contract has been terminated that we're ready to turn the key and all of a sudden have our own in-house personnel to run our own fire department. I did want to let you know that last week I did have our fire chief and I had a chance to also discuss in greater detail with Chief Sewell, who is also here tonight, and was also at the August 23rd workshop when this was presented for the first time. And I know he also has some comments and prepared comments that he would like to make as well. But one of the things I did want to point out is as part of the transition tonight, I know it's either suggesting a 12 or 18 month. There was an idea that came out of that meeting that we had, and that perhaps if you were to consider tonight and take action, that you give 12-month notice, so that would be January of 2024, with the option if there was something going on and we knew, like, you know, during that last 12 months, if things weren't quite going quite as well, that we can also have the option of doing a 6-month extension of the contract. So that would get us to the 18 months if it's needed. It might be very well that we can do this within the 12-month period. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do know that Chief Sewell is here, and he was wanting to make some comments regarding this matter tonight.
Thank you. If it's okay with you all, we'll have Chief come up and give us his comments and his input. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, Mayor Dickey, council members, Mr. Greer, Mr. Miller. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. First of all, I just want to assure everybody that you know, Rural Metro and the town have enjoyed a long relationship with each other. I think it's been mutually beneficial, and I certainly want to express my support that whatever the decision, and it certainly sounds as if the move is towards, you know, bringing it in-house. You know, we're going to, Rural Metro and myself personally are going to support you and the town and the citizens 100% through that transition to make it as seamless and to ensure public safety to the highest degree. So before any of these other comments, just know that that is in fact, you know, my commitment to everyone here. You know, I do want to say that I thought the consultant did an excellent job. Really painted a very good picture and had a lot of good information. There were a number of issues or a number of items that I just wanted to give a little bit of a counter measure to. And if I can digress a little bit, I don't like kind of the fear, the promulgation of fear as a basis to make decisions. So I just wanted to assure you on a number of issues that you should not be fearful of as a part of your consideration. One, Rural Metro has no inclination to leave the town of Fountain Hills. We don't pursue master contracts because the market right now doesn't, there are no additional master contracts to pursue here within the state. There are only 3 states that you can even have master contracts in the entire country. You know, part of what I'll be working with the legislature next year is to try to get the state to make fire suppression an essential form of government, which would eliminate the need for private fire at all. I do believe that government is the appropriate venue for fire suppression. Just so happens that the folks who founded Arizona didn't agree with me. Yeah, but that was a long time ago. So we have no inclination of leaving. We are financially solid. Our firefighters are as well trained as any firefighters in the state and here in the region. Rural Metro provides absolute best practice for the physical conditioning of our firefighters and the mental health of our firefighters, and meet all the NFPA, standards for that. So rest assured, we're not going anywhere. Rural Metro does serve a purpose for transitions from towns like yourself to move towards their own fire departments. That's what happened with Scottsdale and the other areas in the past that Rural Metro's been a part of. I see this as pretty much the same thing. A little bit about NFP 1710. If you guys wanted 4-person engines and paid for them, Rural Metro would certainly provide 4-person engines. The Rural Metro's position, because it's not a form of the government, is we take direction from the local government as far as providing the level of protection they desire. As the consultant said, we've served the town well with the level of service. If the desire is to go to a higher level of service, that's certainly something that can be done with Rural Metro or by bringing it in-house as well. What I will say with regards to 1710 is the only component of 1710 that you'll be able to meet by coming in-house or even going with automatic aid is the staffing requirement. The time requirement you won't meet with 1710 with your own department or with automatic aid. Obviously, you won't meet it with Rural Metro as well. If you chose to go to 4 persons, we can certainly put 4 persons on an engine, just as you will, if you choose to go with your own in-house. And to be clear, most fire departments in the country can't meet 1710. We're very fortunate here in the Phoenix metro region to have a wealth of, we have the population density and the population to support the finances to meet 1710. It's been the biggest hiccup for 1710. The standard for career and professional fire departments is the cost. So regardless, moving in either direction will not, you just don't have the resources available within the time constraints to meet that. Secondly, with regards to 1221, with one of the things that the consultant failed or was unable to get that information, there's a call transfer for the automatic aid system just as well as Rural Metro. So there is no time difference, and both dispatch centers meet 1221. As far as issues of local control, I agree with Mr. Miller, and I think that's certainly something that could have been addressed in contract. I imagine, I've only been here a little under a year. It'll be 12 months next month. But what I've heard and what I've seen in meeting with Chief Ott is that I don't imagine that the town really knows that they don't have their own fire department. The trucks are red, they say Fountain Hills on them, and the firefighters represent Fountain Hills. I would be surprised if the majority of folks realized that you didn't have your own fire department currently, and that's perfect. The majority of the firefighters who are here in your town have been here for 20 or more years. I have to say I did take a little bit of offense to some of the age comments. Not because I'm old as well, but, you know, I've actually stood in front of councils for a number of years to remind folks that public servants are there to serve the public. And it's an agreement between the public and the public servants that they're going to take care of each other, especially as they get older and have more difficulty moving around, right? And just because these guys weren't public servants in the form that they worked for you, they were public servants because they've served your citizens for a long time. And I do think they deserve the opportunity to finish their career and to be taken care of, because they've taken care of you guys and your town for a good portion of that time. You know, lastly, I would say that I have done my own financial analysis. I would not take my word for it, okay? One, I'm a fire chief, not an accountant. Number two, obviously I have a vested interest, right? But I would say that I think in order to have a sustainable labor pool of firefighters who are going to be attracted and be able to recruited and be retained by the town is going to be a little bit more expensive than has previously been expressed. I would also say, obviously, if you move to automatic aid, you know, that also will be even more expensive. So given, you know, it sounds to me, in speaking with Mr. Miller, that the economic indicators that this is a good time to make that move. And if that's the case, then again, we're going to support you 100% in doing that. If the economic conditions change and it turns out to be that's not the case, we're still going to be here, whether we have a contract, you know, with Fountain Hills or not. We'll still be here, and we're going to be, you know, ready and able to assist in meeting your needs regardless of what happens. But again, I just would rather this be framed in the perspective that this is a good thing for you because of the economic times, and this is the right time to make that move, rather than based on fear that we're leaving, that we're not taking care of our folks, and that automatic aid, or the lack of automatic aid, is a threat. I met with the town council, or the city council in Scottsdale, almost a year ago, because there was a decision to cancel the mutual aid agreement with Carefree. When I met with the council, I asked for and received a public commitment from the mayor and the council and the fire chief that just because the contract didn't exist didn't mean we didn't have a mutual aid. They made that public commitment that if we requested help, they were going to help us. It's my understanding in the past 10 years, the town of Fountain Hills has only needed mutual aid twice from the automatic aid system. They came both times. You're going to probably give automatic aid considerably more than you'll receive it. The benefits to getting it when you need it are amazing. It is the gold standard for sure. If we had the same type of incident without automatic aid, we would get all the same resources, just not as quickly. There is no concern about the lack of mutual aid for the town of Fountain Hills. If we ask, we will get the help we need, even though we don't have formal mutual aid contracts. I'm working with CalSec, the Central Arizona Life Safety Council, to get a formal mutual aid contract with CalSec, not the individual cities, as most cities have canceled those because they were pay-for-service agreements. So that was the premise for that. And again, just to finish, again, we're gonna be here to help meet the needs, whatever you choose to do. If this is the right time to make that move, we certainly support it. Again, I would ask that you take care of the folks who've taken care of you for the past 20 to 30 years. regardless of their age. Understanding that there's obviously considerations that you have to make. But I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I'm certainly able to answer. But just as one final note, again, the consultant did a great job. There is no issue of confidentiality. I was never asked any questions by the consultant. I would have answered any of them. I'll answer any of them for you. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll start with thank you very much for your service. You and I had a chance to talk after the last meeting. I will start by my age comments were made in jest, but most of the comments related to age is when the Vice Mayor Friedel at the time had brought up the possibility of Fountain Hills subsidizing the fire department with residents as a volunteer fire department. And I believe I will stand by my comments and say that I think a large portion of the residents have maybe missed their prime as far as wanting to become volunteer firefighters. I'm 56 years old, and you couldn't pay me to get on a ladder or drag a hose. So my question to you, or a statement also that I would like to make is, I did not make the decision to move forward with this based on fear, okay? There's few things I fear. But my decision, you know, it's been said recently, and then the comments got back to me that we made a snap decision in this, and, you know, we didn't get a 12-pack and go over to the mayor's house one weekend and just sit around and decide, hey, what can we do? Let's blow some money and get our own fire department. And we just said, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. This is the fifth time that this has been discussed in public, and we paid a boat ton of money for a study, which I'm vehemently opposed to studies, but we did it. And so I can't speak for any of the other council members, I'm sure they will, but I don't think that we based this decision on fear. So I will ask you, do you know, obviously you know, how many contracts do you have currently in the state of Arizona? Rural Metro.
I do not know. I can tell you here in central Arizona, which is the only place that I'm responsible for, is two.
Two.
Right.
And the other contract is with?
Carefree.
And correct me if I'm wrong, are they currently seeking to privatize their fire department?
Yes, they're going to put a ballot initiative. They're discussing putting a ballot initiative on in May.
Okay, so that leaves you with one contract.
Correct, but we also we have 12 stations, only 3 of which are contract. So that leaves us 9 stations that we still will be running without contracts.
And what corporation owns Rural Metro?
KKR.
And has KKR ever turned a profit when it comes to their fire service?
Yes.
When? Are you talking now?
Every year that I've only been working for 3 years, and we've turned a profit every year.
Okay,
Not,
how many?
Not much, but again, so I've asked this question actually of my leadership. What I've been told, take it with a grain of salt, is that they like having fire departments because it looks good. We're not here to make them money. We're here to make them look good.
But you agree that all corporations are in business to make money?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm assuming they make a ton of money on the other stuff.
Okay. How many times has Rural Metro filed bankruptcy?
I don't know.
Okay, it's over 3 times. So, and Chief, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm not trying to embarrass you.
No, not
Believe me when I tell you, I have the utmost respect for you, what you do. My whole career has been in law enforcement. I never even thought for a second to be a fireman. Not my bag.
I won't hold it against you.
Well, you know, God created policemen so firemen could have idols. So, but I just, you know, I know that you work for Rural Metro. It's your job to represent Rural Metro and everything. But I just think that, I think that this council and for citizens who have emailed me and said, you know, I didn't put any thought into this, I find it offensive because I don't make snap decisions up here. And I would think that anybody on this council or any citizen would say that I've been a fiscal watchdog when it comes to spending money. Do I believe that it's going to, the initial startup is going to be a tough pill to swallow? Yes, I do. But in the long run, I believe it's the right thing. So thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciated your comments.
And if, I apologize if I gave the impression that I thought you based any decision, I don't believe that. I think, obviously, you're the stewards of the community and don't give short shrift to decisions that you have to make. But from the perspective of sitting out and watching the meeting, the positive aspects of doing it weren't the ones that caught my attention. It was the negatives. That's all.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple questions, and I don't know whether you can answer this or maybe Grady can. Can we do this in 12 months? Can we transition in 12 months? Is that realistic? Do you think?
Based on what I've heard, Scottsdale was 19, but Scottsdale was a much more complex organization. Talking to Chief Sewell, the concern is the longer you have as a period, it starts to have the personnel get a little nervous because even though we'll likely go through a rehiring process for them, 12 months is a better goal to be tighter and ready to go. So my preference would be 12 months because I do think it can be done in 12 months. Chief, did you have, I know we talked about this last week as well.
I have a follow-up question then too. Will any of this come back before the council? Any other decisions once we give direction to the town staff?
Of course, there's going to be, you'll get the transition plan for sure. So you'll get to see that, and we'll likely have that discussed and looked at, and there'll be likely items related to maybe budgetary types of things like that. And then also the budget process. So you'll get to see that. And then what I'm going to suggest is through our annual budget process, we'll get a little bit more into this and have a little bit more detail, but when we have our council workshop retreat, I'm suggesting that we go ahead and typically we have a surplus at the end of each year, and I'm going to suggest that we put together a transition package as part of the budget, just to anticipate that there may be some higher costs that we didn't factor or costs that we didn't quite get right, just as a buffer. And then we'll get, the following year will be appropriately budgeted. So I think that's just a way to do this, just to make sure that we don't get ourselves caught. But council will definitely have a couple different steps along the way that they'll be able to weigh in on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your being forthright and sincerity, and appreciate the support you're going to give us, no matter what happens. And I've been working or living out here almost 40 years, so I've seen Rural Metro and the fire department from all angles, all these decades, and have appreciated the men and women who have served us well, and so I commend them for that. And a couple things, this kind of reminds me of the debate back years ago when MCO still owned Fountain Park, and they wanted to turn it over to the town, and it's like, well, yeah, it's going to cost the town a lot of money, but if you want to gain control, if you want to improve it or do whatever you want, you have to own it and take it over. So you have to initially kind of take a hit, and with this, I'm glad to hear there's going to be a transition plan in terms of stockpiling some money to take care of the initial costs. And I know there was one public comment that we had written out here from Bob Scarpetti, another police officer, but retired, and he was talking about, basically he's against taking it over, but he says, I'd much rather see a fire district like we used to have, and it wasn't part of the town budget. And it's one thing I have to agree with Bob on. I didn't agree with the council decision back in the day to disband the fire district, and they had the their own finances and their own little separate board to take care of just the fire service. And I still don't know what was wrong with it at the time, but they did what they did. And so we took it over and have borne the cost since then. And so our budget would be a lot different if we didn't have to fund fire service. But that being said, there actually was an effort to start a whole new fire district, and they went door to door with petitions, and effort didn't quite make it, but they had to get a certain amount of assessed valuation, and it was kind of a complicated deal. Anyway, that's kind of a short history lesson. But anyway, I agree with Councilman Spellage. I think it's just economics, like you were mentioning, the current climate, and just feel it's a good time to take the reins and bring it in house. So, yep.
Thanks very much. Any other questions from council? I want to, before we'll probably get some public comments, but I wanted to thank you so much, and you coming here, and I know that you weren't here when we had the second meeting, and that probably would have been a time where you were hearing things like, not quite, So I really appreciate that you, took the time to see those things and then to set records straight. I agree with David and others that I think the fear aspect of it, it was something to talk about, but it wasn't a driving force, at least in my opinion. I think what illustrates right here is, a loyalty that we all feel a loyalty to you, feel loyalty to the guys and gals that are there, but there's always that little thing in the back of your head, but we're not free, they don't actually work for us, and it's just something that we can't get over that hump. That's kind of my idea of it. I still do think that the mutual aid and the auto aid will be a good thing for us to have in the long run, and we'll keep working towards that. But, and then I listened to your first comments and talking about going to the legislature and maybe making some changes that might kind of go in this direction for others also. So, maybe that's just the right way and the right time for us to do it. It has been a long time, and obviously we are loyal and grateful, and really appreciate you being here and being available. I think we probably have some speaker cards, so we'll go with that. And then if you have anything else you'd like to add, we're fine. You can come back up. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor, we do. Well, first, we do have the written comments, and I would like to say their name. Bob Scarpetti, as Councilmember Shano said, he is against the in-house fire department. We have Sherry Lynn James. She is in favor of the fire department. And then we have Dave Long, who is also in support of the in-house fire district. Now we do have some comment cards. First is Barry Wolborski.
I apologize for double dipping tonight, but it's all part of my effort to get you to pronounce my name right. Councilman Spellage, when I was a young guy of your age, I was a volunteer firefighter climbing ladders with a hose. Too late. I also pried people out of car wrecks, but I'll tell you, I did other things too. I went to the lady's house with the aid car when her son's nose was bleeding because he had a bloody nose, but she was panicking because he was dying. And I calmed down the son and I calmed down the mother. And I did a lot of things like that, and I felt like I was part of the community. And when I went to the Safeway store, people said, "Hi, Barry, how are you?" Because they knew me because I had come and put out their chimney fire, which, by the way, you don't use water on. And, we attracted a lot of volunteers from around neighboring communities. The reason why is for a young man who doesn't really want to go to college for 4 years, being a firefighter is a very lucrative career. They work part-time, they can have 2 jobs, they get paid very well as a firefighter. And it's hard to get one of those jobs. If you volunteer for a district for a period of time, and you spend time with the other volunteers and you spend time with the paid firefighters, they really help you, coach you for your oral exams, for your written exams, and it looks good on your record that you've spent 2 or 3 years as a volunteer firefighter. So they do get hired. We usually kept them for about 2 to 3 years, and then we'd lose them when we get new ones in and train them. They were all well-trained. They were all EMTs. They all got hired as professional firefighters and got paid a lot more for doing the same work. And it was a very, not only was it an efficient way to do it, but it was a community way to do it. And I really urge you to consider that if you're considering switching over. You have a paid corps of firefighters, and then you augment that with as many volunteers as you want. And you know, I know one of the things we have here is we have some fairly interesting brush fires. I remember one a couple of years ago watching it out my window and saying, it would be nice to have an additional cadre of 25 or 50 people if you ever needed it in that situation, and then you would have that. So I really recommend that instead of just throwing money at problems, that you look for creative solutions, like maybe a fire department that's part paid and part volunteer, that meets the needs of the community and gives you the protection you need. That's all I've got.
Thank you for your service, sir. Yes, Jerry?
Barry, I want to buy you a drink after the meeting today, because that was my idea too, to have some volunteers. So anyway, I'm glad somebody else voiced their concern. Thanks.
Next, we have Lee Shattuck. Lee?
Good evening, and I apologize for not attending the other meetings on this subject of rural metro. I absolutely think that rural metro have done a superb job, and I'm here to voice my disagreement with the possibility of not renewing the rural metro contract. We have used them for medical purposes, and they give a stellar service. They're always prompt, courteous, and efficient. The formation of our own emergency response service for Fountain Hills, as stated by the study, seems costly. $1 million for a formation and operation to initiate, and you may well be quite sure that could go over, plus $400,000 annually to operate. These numbers are much in excess of current charges, it seems. It is rare for new projects to come out under budget. I also fail to understand the thinking behind the opinion that because Rural Metro is owned by KKR, a private equity company, that they have to be in it for the money. They have a reputation of being one of the more reputable and less greedy private equity companies in the country. I hereby present my objection to discontinuing Rural Metro, and likewise the formation of our own police force. Recruiting of these special public servants is extremely difficult in the present climate of defund the police and public cynicism for our police. It would be detrimental to the town of Fountain Hills. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And then our last card is from Council-elect Brenda Calavianakis.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, Mr. Miller. I have a prepared statement, but before I do that, I'd like to thank Grady for bringing up the August 23rd workshop where they gave very good qualifications for rural metro. Thanks for reminding us of that. Also the chief saying this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. And also his comments about, I feel also that the last time we met on this subject that they were selling a lot of fear, okay, about wonder if this and wonder if that. I don't like to base my judgments on fear or hypotheticals. I want to talk to you tonight about tabling this agenda item for a future town council session. First of all, this is literally a lame duck council. We shouldn't be making this type of a decision right now. According to the Heritage Foundation, barring exceptional circumstances or strict emergency, Congress should not consider making any major or presidential nominations during a so-called lame duck session. Doing so undermines the representative government by weakening the accountability link between the people and their elected representatives. The idea of having an in-house fire department has been ongoing for years. The idea has always been dropped when the true expenses of such a venture become evident. Besides liability insurance, other insurance, health care. The fire personnel would enter the state pension system. The state pension system and the long-term health care repercussions alone could bankrupt our town. Scottsdale made the mistake of going with their own fire department. They found out it costs a lot more money than they were told. Scottsdale has big problems now, and it will get worse, compounded by a bill passed recently in the legislature to ensure long-term care for any firefighter who comes down with any form of cancer, any form of cancer. It doesn't need to be proved there's a correlation between fighting fires. No causation is required to the job. The liability would fall on our town. That's not good. John Kavanaugh, our state rep, this weekend contacted Jim Lane, the former mayor of Scottsdale. Mr. Lane admitted the mistake of going with their own in-house fire department. After 3 years leaving rural, they had a 45% increase in spending with the possibility of picking up further expenses. That would be $4.5 million more than if they would have stayed with rural. The same procedure, this is an apples and apples. Scottsdale's a sister city. We can expect the same results. Also in Scottsdale, they left it up to a vote of the people, not the 7 people in the chamber that we have here tonight. They had no increase in service, just more expenses. The best mistakes to learn are for other people's mistakes. Let's learn from Scottsdale's mistakes. To repeat, it is unusual for a lame duck council to take on a project of this significance on their way out the door. And very importantly, what about the tax ramifications of this gamble with our limited resources? With this unnecessary spending be the impetus for a property tax, perhaps the residents will not get road repair, flood mitigation, or any other important improvements because all the money will have gone to pay for our new fire department. Let's take time and think this through and the ramifications of this major decision. Let's talk to Scottsdale and other towns about their experience in fire protection. Let's slow down and consider the liabilities and the financial commitments we are exposing to ourselves to. Let's table this agenda item tonight and leave this in future business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman-elect, I just wanted to mention that Scottsdale did not make that decision. They were forced to do that. They did a vote of the people. The people decided to stay with rural metro, and right after that, rural metro pulled out. So they could not make that decision themselves to stay with that contract. I don't know if there were any other alternatives to going in-house, but they did not have the alternative to stay with rural metro. Rural metro left Scottsdale. Number one. Number two, I wholeheartedly support that bill that passed to protect firefighters because they are subjected to toxic and other items that do cause long-term, and you may not be able to say this day that happened or that day that happened. And for this legislature to have passed it, I feel like it was very worthwhile. And number three, I wasn't going to bring this up, but my son is a Scottsdale fire captain.
I'm aware of that.
All the issues that you're talking about and the woe is me is not the case. And I don't think that we're lame duck at all. We have been looking at this for a long time, the sitting council members here and council members before this also, but that this is very appropriately a decision for this council. That's my decision, but that's my opinion anyway. If anybody has any other comments, you're welcome to it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Your time to talk is over. You had your 3 minutes.
Okay, well,
Now
I
it's
thought
my
you-
turn.
I thought you wanted me to address her, but if that's my
This isn't a
mistake,
back
if I
and
don't get a
forth. You
chance
had
to-
your public comment. Now it's my turn to talk.
I thought in the public comment that you didn't refer to the
Council-
people, the commenters, and I thought
Let's
that
let
this.
Councilman speak, and then you can absolutely.
Okay, sure.
I do not,
respond.
under any stretch of the imagination, consider myself to be a lame duck. I've made wise decisions, which I think are wise decisions that I've researched the last 4 years, so I take offense to be calling a lame duck. I don't necessarily believe that by extending this to the next council, you bring any more knowledge to the fire service than I bring to the fire service. We had a study done. We reviewed that study. We spoke about it. This is the 4th time we've talked about it. This is the first time you've appeared. So I take offense to it because it kind of seems that it's like we're rushing this. And I don't believe we are rushing it. If anybody is stoking fear, it's you by saying that you think that we're unable to make decisions and that only the future council is going to make the correct decisions. I believe every council member and the mayor up here will make decisions that are wise up until the time that we leave office. So I'm offended by your comments. This is not the first time you've addressed this council and spoke down to us and minimized us. You've done it under the Daybreak, you've done it under, or I'm sorry, not Daybreak, Park Place, and other things. So your turn will come in December, and then you can make these decisions, but right now we're making these decisions. And I think we've researched this. I don't believe that this is based on fear. I believe it's based on what we believe is best for the residents. And as the town manager said, you will have the ability to voice your decision once you put your hand on the Bible and swear and get sworn in as an elected official, because right now you are not. So I'm offended by your comments. I've been offended by your comments in the past. I don't like to publicly call people out, and I've held my comments when you've made disparaging remarks to us, and this time I will not hold my tongue.
I concur with Councilmember Spellich. I think you are extremely rude and disrespectful to the council of which you are elected to. We are not lame ducks. We're not stupid. You are looking at a very experienced council with 3 council members having over 12 years of experience in this town and guiding it to the success it is today. And for you to one more time come in here and tap your hand on the side of that podium as if we're the problem and you're not, is so disrespectful. I just can't not say anything. I have never once heard you say one thing good about this town. You should be ashamed of that.
You might want to check the definition of lame duck. It's after the election and before you get seated.
We're not Congress,
it's in the dictionary,
we're the
it's in the
local council.
encyclopedia. Just because you're not aware of the
If you
definition
chose your
doesn't mean
words.
it's not true.
Did you want to respond further?
I think I've said enough.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any further comments or comments from the audience or the folks?
Mayor, no, we have no further public comment.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have a motion, a suggested motion. Grady, I do have a question before. The way it's written down, 12 to 18 months, is that what you would like it to say? Or just 12?
My suggestion would be, why don't you just have it approved as is? The goal is to stick to 12 months, and then if we need the additional 6 months, I could do a formalized letter to Rural Metro asking for an extension of time.
Okay, thank you. Motion?
I'll make a motion. I would like to move to officially establish an in-house fire department with the town fire personnel, provide proper notice of ending the agreement with Rural Metro in 12 to 18 months as needed, and direct staff to develop a transition plan to fully implement an in-house fire department.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Our next item is along the same lines. We're going to talk about law enforcement. Grady?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and call on our Chief Financial Officer, who will then make a brief introduction of Matrix Consulting Group, who will give you a presentation as a follow-up to what we just had previously. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Pock.
All right, I don't have much more to say than that. It was about a year ago when this contract actually was signed after the RFP process. We did meet in September to go over the draft findings, and Greg Matthews is back again as a return with the draft final report and their recommendations. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, David. Well, good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you for having me back. My name is Greg Matthews. I'm a senior manager with Matrix Consulting Group, and this is a follow-up to our presentation that we did about 8 weeks ago, just after Labor Day, on the financial and feasibility analysis for Fountain Hills related to law enforcement operations. So tonight I have about a 10 slide presentation. So we should be able to get through this relatively quickly. As we did last visit, please feel free to interject as we're going through the slide presentation. I don't want to sit here and lecture you. I prefer some interaction if you don't mind. Otherwise, if you wish to hold your questions, that's more than fine, because there's the 11th slide, which has a question mark for questions. So with that, let me go ahead and begin the slide presentation. Let's see if I remember after 8 weeks how to use this. I do. Very good. So what is the agenda for the presentation? Tonight we'll discuss the key findings, conclusions, and the recommendation of the draft report that has been provided to you and is in your package. There are 3 major items that we'll be discussing. We'll discuss the law enforcement services assessment. As you may remember, 2 months ago, we talked in some level of detail about that when we were speaking about issue areas. We'll talk a little bit about the law enforcement contract review. We actually reviewed the terms and conditions. We didn't talk too much about that a few months ago. And we'll also talk about the alternative service delivery model. That was one of the major focuses of this particular engagement, looking at an alternative contract operation or possibly an in-house police department. With respect to that in-house police department, we've put together a operational profile as well as a pro forma budget. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So just as a reminder, and if you'd like to interject here, please do so, but the last council discussion, this is just a quick summary of what we accomplished during that meeting in September. As you recall, we discussed various issues and assumptions to get your feedback with respect to this particular engagement. Some of the many topics that we discussed regarding the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office contract was the demographics of your town, as well as the overall safety of the town. We talked about the contract that you have with the Sheriff's Office and the number of staff that you're contracted for, and as a matter of fact, how that doesn't equate to the actual deployment levels which you're undertaking. We talked about the importance of proactive time with regard to patrol. If you recall the whole proactive time discussion, the time available after calls for service and those things related to that, and what is the staffing impact of having certain amounts of proactive time. We talked about investigations and detective caseloads and the staffing impacts related to that. We talked about key issues related to the current contract. One, of course, I already illustrated, and that was you presently have less deployed staff than your contract calls for. So those are some of the things that we discussed, and that provided a framework for our meeting two months ago, and basically the foundation, essentially, of this report that we've drafted for you. Recall that part of that effort was looking to see if you have any other potential contract partners, and you do not. We checked with Scottsdale, we checked with the Indian Reservation, and they have no short or medium-term interest in providing any contracted law enforcement services. And then we also talked about certain guidelines for what an in-house police department might look like to basically profile for all of you what that is in this particular report. So that's what we did early September. So let's talk now about some of the outcomes of this particular draft report that we put together, and the patrol findings and recommendations. As you probably recall, the Sheriff's Office generally deploys staffing at the minimum staffing level of 3 personnel per shift. Recall that that's below the contracted service levels of 4 deputies per shift. And despite this level of staffing that you presently have, you have more than adequate proactive time in patrol, as well as excellent response times in patrol. So at that level of 3 staff, you have 73% proactive time available. Your response times are, I'll use the term extraordinary, for both high priority calls as well as lower priority calls. So what are some of the key recommendations that we detail for you in the report? We recommend you actually, in the contract, reduce patrol deputies from the contracted level of 19 personnel to 16 positions, and continue to deploy, as you have done, 3 deputies on the day shift and 3 deputies on the night shift. We don't recommend any changes to your minimum staffing levels, so your minimum staffing level should be at 3. So you contract for 3, your minimum staffing levels are 3, and in the event somebody's absent, they're called in, people are called in on overtime so that you're always at that minimum staffing level. We recommend that in the contract you add 1 patrol sergeant. Presently you contract for 3. You should have 4 patrol sergeants, 1 on each shift, to ensure line supervision and oversight. We recommend that you retain the 1 school resource officer that you presently have. We recommend adding 1 watch commander lieutenant. Right now you pay for 1.25 lieutenants. You should have a watch commander or a manager position on each of your major shifts. And then, of course, you should retain 1 captain, which I'm sure Larry is happy to hear about. Next slide. So with respect to the detective findings and recommendations, your detective caseload metrics, that's the primary work that they do, the cases that they undertake are basically below benchmark expectations. We talked about that in some level of detail, as you probably remember, in early September. You have a contract that charges you for 2.55 detective positions that carry anywhere between 6.8 and 7.2 cases monthly on average for each of them. Many of those cases have limited solvability, meaning you really wouldn't work them very hard because it's very difficult to solve those kinds of cases. Caseload benchmarks for generalist detectives, which is the kind of detectives that are really being deployed here for you all, are 9 to 12 workable cases per month. So you can compare that 9 to 12 versus the 6.8 to 7.2 that they have. So given their workload metrics, given what's going on with respect to detective operations and what have you, we recommend reducing the detective staffing that's charged to Fountain Hills from 2.55 to 2 detectives. We recommend, we discussed this again in September, locating these 2 detectives here in the Fountain Hills substation. So instead of a regional detective over at the sheriff's office, bring them on board here at the substation. And then we also recommend that the sheriff's office should provide quarterly metrics on detective caseloads, on case clearances, and those types of things. They don't provide a lot of data, as we discussed in some level of detail in the last meeting, and that data should actually be acquired and provided by the sheriff's office for you. So what is the key fiscal finding related to the various recommendations that we made? The sheriff's office basically has the ability to provide exceptional service at the recommended staffing levels that we provided to you in the report. That's reduced patrol staffing compared to your present contract. That's slightly reduced detective staffing. That's increasing sergeants and what have you. And that net impact is an annual savings of about $219,000 per annum on your present contract. So one of the other steps that we undertook for you all was to look at the present contract, the language of the contract, the terms and conditions, etc. So what are some of the findings and recommendations related to that? So the contract terms and conditions, as you read through it, are generally thorough. Remember, we're not lawyers, but we can look at them with an eye to law enforcement professionals. There are a couple of exceptions based on our read of the contract that should be addressed. You have no financial penalties for non-performance. So basically, the sheriff's office inability to provide you the contract services, you don't have any language that gives you an opportunity or leverage to assess penalties for non-performance. There's no dispute resolution process identified in your contract. So if you have a dispute with the sheriff's office, there's no formality embedded within the contract on how you resolve that particular dispute. There's no particular performance metrics beyond the patrol response time for priority 1 that's listed within the contract. With respect to performance metrics in most professional services contracts, you should have them because it allows you to effectuate appropriate contract management. So we recommend you devise performance metrics beyond just the priority 1 calls in the contract. So consequently, what are some of the key recommendations that we have for you related to that contract review? Add non-performance penalties and dispute resolution to the contract. Report quarterly on various contract-based performance metrics. What would those look like? Response times, which is in there for priority 1 but not other responses. Detective case clearance metrics, those kinds of things. So collectively, you can devise some performance metrics which you would expect the sheriff to be able to achieve, just like they have on response times for priority 1s, such that you can monitor and manage that contract effectively. Significantly improve the monthly invoice details to enhance the town's internal controls and avoid various overcharging situations that have occurred. Your invoice presently from the sheriff's office is very Spartan, if you will. It needs to be much more detailed such that you can manage the contract effectively from a financial perspective. And then one of the other elements that needs to be revisited in the contract is how you staff your law enforcement operation beyond what's defined as the beach structure approach, again discussed in September. We suggest, instead of using a beat structure for defining patrol staffing levels, detective staffing levels, et cetera, that you instead use more robust metrics such as proactive time, which we've discussed, detective caseloads, which we've discussed, those kinds of things. So those are elements in the future contract, if you so choose to pursue a future contract with the sheriff, that should be changed and adjusted so that you can better manage the contract and the respective operations. So this is one of the interests of you all, and that is, what would an in-house police department potentially look like compared to the sheriff's office operation? So here's a table of the police department, Fountain Hills Police Department, that we devised for you. This is based on a lot of the conversations we've had, similar staffing based on proactive time, detective workloads, et cetera. So you can see as we have arranged it all the way from a chief of police, all the way through lieutenants, number of patrol deputies, the school resource officers, detectives, sergeants. In-house, you'd need some clerical and administrative assistance. We recommend that you continue contracting for dispatch services with the sheriff's office. There would be an embedded charge for that staffing associated with that. And the bottom line is, for the in-house police department that we created, it would be approximately 31 total staff. So what does those 31 total staff actually look like when it comes to costing this out? That will be the last slide on the slide presentation. So let's give you a little bit of detail regarding that table. So the in-house police department staffing is based on the report recommendations that essentially are equivalent to the recommended sheriff's office staffing that we said you should adjust to. That would be 3 deputies on day shift and 3 on night. It would be the 2 detectives. It would be 5 sergeants, 4 on patrol and 1 in support services. It would be 3 managers, a chief and 2 lieutenants. It would be the continuation of 911 dispatch as we suggested with the sheriff's office. There's other components that are important as we costed this out for your consideration, and as a matter of fact, in some respects, to your benefit, Fountain Hills already has a PD facility here that requires minimal revision. Many instances when other organizations go through this assessment, one of the restricting factors is that they have to build a new police department. You don't really have to do that. That is of benefit to you. We did in-house salaries for this in-house police department based on a competitive pay with 6 other regional towns. And we also developed pro forma costs that are competitive but not excessive. That's our definition. Now remember, when you develop a pro forma budget, there are literally dozens and dozens of inputs that you can put in a pro forma budget. Remember, it's a theoretical model based on your best judgments and assessments. So that's what we did. This model that we created is in a very sophisticated Excel spreadsheet that we'll be providing to the town so that that can be manipulated and all kinds of other pro forma models can be developed if you wish. But this is the outcome of the pro forma model that we devised. I don't expect you to look or read this right now. I just wanted to present it here this evening to give you a illustration of the level of detail that this budget pro forma model can result in. This is a listing of many of the major characteristics of the budget model, ranging from personnel costs to retirement costs, benefits and incentives, startup costs related to sworn personnel's equipment, vehicle costs, supply cost, external contracts, workers' compensation and risk insurance, and then other startup costs. And other startup costs are related to that year 1 cost that you would incur as a consequence of transitioning potentially from the sheriff's office to your own internal police department. So the total projected year 1 costs are about $8.8 million. The projected yearly operating costs are $4.5 million. So you can see there's about $4.3 million calculated in startup cost for the first year. That's again to buy a variety of things to transition from the sheriff to your own in-house PD. So what are the in-house police department conclusions that we arrived at developing this pro forma model for you? A Fountain Hills Police Department would save approximately $500,000 per year compared to the existing sheriff's contract. Now remember, this in-house police department is presently staffed in a way that is below your current contract, not the contract that we recommend you move to, but compared to your current contract. So that savings compared to your current contract would be $500,000 annually. However, there's approximately $300 in savings when compared to the recommended revised contract that we suggested for you. Again, that's reduced patrol deputies, that's reduced detectives, etc. $300,000 a year. I'm sorry if I said $300. Nope, it's a lot more. Add like three zeros to that. Sorry, $300,000 savings compared to recommended revised. Thank you for the correction. So the PD startup costs, and you mentioned this in September's meeting. Don't be extremely surprised, but the startup costs are usually the prohibiting factor, frankly, in moving from any kind of contract. It's $4.3 million, that's the startup costs. Again, these are based on the variables we selected, so those can change, but we think that's probably within the 90% to 100%, 110% range of $4.3 million. This results in a 9-year break-even versus your current contract, so 500,000 times 9 is 4.5 million, 4.3 million startup, so you get about a 9-year break-even. If you moved to the recommended contract with the sheriff, then the break-even point extends to 14 years. So consequently, given these startup costs, which you can define however you wish, it's in the millions, We would recommend that you maintain the sheriff's office contract, but based on the recommended revisions that we have suggested to you in the report. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. Questions from council?
Not a question. First off, thanks for the presentation. It was great. Unlike the fire contract, and let me also start by saying, Mr. Wobarski, thank you very much for your service as a volunteer firefighter. I think that there's 3 people in this room that have the most knowledge about this, and that would be Captain Kratzer, yourself, and myself. So I will tell you that your presentation's spot on. I have told everybody that my ideal would be to have our own police department. I would love to see Fountain Hills have their own police department. I knew it was going to be a big number. I have to be honest with you, I didn't think it was going to be that big, but it's a big number. I believe that we have to take into consideration currently that we're in a recession and that I think that the economy is going to get worse. So do I think that the citizens of Fountain Hills' appetite for getting on board with this, I don't think they're going to have much of an appetite for getting on board with this because the cost is prohibitive, I believe, at the time, because we'll have declining revenue and everything. I totally agree with you that we have to put in our contract penalties for MCSO not fulfilling their obligations. MCSO, as you stated last time, hasn't fulfilled their obligations or their contract in years. So I'm glad that someone else other than myself has been saying that. I will also go back to a meeting a few months back, maybe not even a few months back, in which I said to my fellow council members, as well as the town manager and the mayor, that we have this street committee that's going to make decisions or give us input on streets. I think it's absolutely imperative that when this contract is negotiated, we put together a committee of retired law enforcement, which this town is full of, that can help us along with your presentation and your facts to help create the new contract that we're going to enter into. Obviously, this is a big number, and so we're going to have to sign up again with MCSO. So there was no action on that, and after I'd said that, nobody ever said a word to me. So once again, I will state that I believe that we should have a group put together of retired law enforcement who were in staff and command and did budgets for major metropolitan police departments to sit in on this, because I believe that internally there's not enough knowledge within the staff to enter into these contracts. I don't fault them for that. They're not in law enforcement. I am troubled over the fact that MCSO has been a little hesitant to share with you, as well as with us, what the clearance rate is for detectives. What have they been clearing? You ask for a reduction, or you suggest a reduction in detectives. I would like to see that based on what is the clearance rate? For those of you in the audience, when a detective is assigned a case, to see that case all the way through, be it an arrest, prosecution, or unfounded or no suspect, that's all in a clearance rate. So I still, to this day, do not know what MCSO's clearance rate is when it comes to detectives. I'd love to have that number before I leave. So a really well together, put together presentation. I agree with all of your points. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the reduction of, you want to go to 3 deputies. Right now we're paying for 4, correct?
Correct.
So more is always better. So I just don't think at the present time, and I'm only speaking for myself, I just don't know if the residents, I mean, we got a little pushback from the fire thing. If we see now what the pushback would be on an additional $4 million in the long run, is it good? I just don't think the economy right now is good enough to do that. But I really enjoyed your presentation. I think it's spot on. I think we should follow it like a text when we go into contract negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Councilman.
questions? I know the evening's late, but I'm here at your leisure. I don't fly out till 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Do we have any comment cards?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you. I have a question for you, David. So the staffing that is suggested, you're except for possibly wanting to not reduce, the rest of it looks good to you.
Yeah, before I would make a public decision, or before I would like to make an informed decision if I could get the clearance rate and find out exactly how many cases detectives are clearing and everything. And please, everyone who's listening, everybody in the audience, everyone who'll go back and look at this, Bob Burns, we still have, what is it, the second safest community, and we're tied. So, I mean, I'm really proud of the job MCSO does. I say it 1,000 times. It's nothing against Captain Kranzer or the men and women of this department. I back them 100% and praise them every chance I get. But before I would make it, I would like to stick with 4 deputies per watch. Of course, keep Captain Kratzer. I think we're doing okay with the 1 lieutenant that we have. We have Lieutenant Halverson, who actually does the work of 3 lieutenants, and I think Captain Kratzer would agree with me. He's an outstanding human being and an excellent police officer. So before, Mayor, I would give you my decision on the staffing of the detectives. I'd like to know what the clearance rate is and everything before I make my decision. So if I could get those statistics and everything before I leave, since I'm a lame duck councilman, but you might want to hear from me, I would like those statistics, and then I can let you know.
Thank you. Councilman?
I have a question for Councilman Spillage. Are you interested in serving on that committee?
I would serve on that committee. Yes, I would, as long as the committee is put together in a hurried fashion and before I retire. So as long as it was probably within the first 6 to 8 months of next year, I would be proud to be on that committee. I know some individuals who have been instrumental in creating big budgeted contracts for police departments that have expressed to me when I said this last time that they would like to be a part of it. So I think we could really bring some expertise to this and really work out a great contract. So the answer is yes, Councilman Friedel.
Thank you. Let's see where to. I guess I'm not opposed to a committee. I'm just not sure. I could see that kind of turning into I don't know, kind of a nightmare as well, because I know that, yeah, the guys have a lot of background, big cities, negotiating budgets. I know expertise would be good, but for this fire service thing, we're not forming a committee of 10 fire chiefs either. So I'm just a little hesitant on that. But anyway, that's going to be up to future Councilor Grady, I guess. And then the 3 versus 4 deputies. I don't know how long we've been understaffed. It's been a while, and it seems like the numbers that were being shown in terms of the response times and the proactive time and all that are super high. So I don't know if, I know David said more is better, but it just seems like if 3 is doing an excellent job, I'm just not sure why we wouldn't take advantage of the staffing recommendations that the consultant is giving us. Do you also work with negotiating contracts, or is that outside of your realm of expertise in terms of, I know you do these studies and such, but
It's not in our wheelhouse. We have done it before. I hate passing up business, but I'm also a straight shooter, so that's the answer. I can tell you on the side, I represented management in a different arena for contract negotiations, so we could do it, but it's not going to be at the top of our resume.
yeah. Well, I mean, I too like all your recommendations, and I hope once we do enter negotiations that all of that stuff is on the table and we can obviously come up with something that's amenable to both sides, but yet, you know, it gives us some more latitude in terms of enforcement of the contract and some of those other parameters you outlined. So I think that's money well spent on this study in terms of getting these recommendations. The last thing, and I don't know if this is a question for the captain or for our consultant or Grady, but I'm just wondering, you know, can we move somehow in the future toward 2 SROs? I've been getting a lot more involved, you know, through the Drug Prevention Coalition with activities on the 2 major campuses that we have, and our current SRO is excellent. She's doing a wonderful job, but I just see the need for almost 2 SROs in the future with, you know, with all the stuff going on in the world out there, and I just think a presence on each campus is a good thing. And I don't know if we can work, you know, one of the 3 deputies into serving part-time on a campus, or I don't really know how that stuff works, but I just would like to see us think about that at least.
We'll go ahead and explore that, council member, and I also want to chime in on what Councilmember Spelledge said about the advisory committee. Staff is all fine with that. In fact, I had met with the person that worked in the Chicago area a couple years ago. Very qualified individual, and I think he would be definitely, in addition to you, probably top of the list to include. To your point, though, we want to make sure it's structured well in terms of we want to make sure that we provide the current agreement to them and also try to get the performance measures and other items that we need to include and get them to advise us on it, and then we would then basically have our staff team be the ones that would negotiate with MCSO on that. So I think it can be done. I just want to make sure it's structured well so that we don't get into some issues.
One of the things that we talked about too is when you presented before was the idea of that proactive time and somehow folding in some of the needs that we see, which may change. You know, there may be a focus that would be different from one year to the next. Like, you know, if we're talking about homelessness or whatever, or short-term rentals, or, you know, fill in the blank, the schools, the dances, the sports. You know, there may be opportunities now, if we're going to relook at the contract, to personalize it, if that's the right word, or for our community, which is something that we had done in the past. And to David's point, first of all, I have spoken to you about this. I didn't ignore you. But I think that is it illustrates a flaw that with the contract, because the people sitting there making the contract weren't really, you know, the whole idea of the beats and stuff was always something that was, and I was on that committee years ago, and it was something to wrap your head around for someone that wasn't used to that. So so I do appreciate that that suggestion, and I think it all actually works together with everything that everybody has said. So yes, sir.
Just one additional comment. Thanks for your presentation. You highlighted the fact that we weren't getting what we were paying for, and I think David's been harping on that. So that's still a resolution that we have to arrive at too, what's happened in the past, and come to a resolution on that as well.
Anything else? Thanks very much.
All right, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with you all.
All right, and so next, Grady, we'll just, what would be next for us on this?
Well, it appears the consensus is for us to continue with the MCSL contract. So I believe the next step would be maybe we'll outline the next steps with negotiating a contract and how that process might be. We have basically, our goal is, in my opinion, to try to get a multi-year to you sometime in the spring. And so we should get going on that process with advisory group and such. So we could probably give you a presentation at a later time as to what the next steps will look like.
Perfect. And that would go into your time frame there.
Exactly,
So,
that's what I just told him.
I thought that's what you were saying. Well, thank you. Our next item, of course, is a direction to the town manager or council discussion. Anything? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.